I sort of got fired from a newspaper a while back. At least I felt like I was fired. I went to the editor and said, "I'm confused about something. Was I fired?" And he said, "No, you quit, didn't you?" I said, "I guess so. I just wanted to clear that up." What happened was, I wasn't making enough money at this newspaper job, so I told the editor I was going to keep my eyes open for something that paid better. He said, "Keep us informed." Then the local college had an opening for an arts administrator. This was right up my alley. I'd been involved with the performing arts for a lot of years, from the performer side more than the administrator side. I was so excited about this college thing. I went to the editor and said, "You asked me to keep you informed. I found a job I want to apply for." Well, 2 hours later, I was told to turn in my keys. I was out of the newspaper business. I guess I didn't understand what he meant by keep us informed. I didn't think he meant keep us informed so we can give you the sack. But I happily went on my way. All things work for good. A few weeks passed while I waited to learn about the college job. My parents visited on one of those weekends. My dad always wanted to see a performance of the Royal Lipizzan Stallions, this fancy breed of horses on a perpetual tour in an equestrian display of riding styles dating back to non-mechanized warfare. I bought some tickets so I could take Dad, along with my sons, William and James. Now, the horse show was nice enough. I kept my eye on my dad during the whole thing. I was noticing he had more interest in his grandsons than in the show. During intermission, Dad watched Will and James play on the fairground lawn, rolling down a grassy slope. He was so intently focused, so clearly enjoying that moment, watching them. It was as if the Royal Lipizzan Stallions were not the headline act. My dad was wearing a windbreaker. A few days earlier, I'd seen a photograph of James Dean wearing a windbreaker. I remember thinking of that James Dean photo. No one looks like that. No one stands out in a crowd like James Dean in this picture. It's all staged. But there, at that horse show, my dad was walking through the crowd in that same kind of jacket, and he did stand out. He had a kind of magnetism. I don't think it was the jacket, but the jacket was very cool. My dad came from a generation of guys who wore short, trim jackets like James Dean wore. The same generation popularized leather flight jackets and Ike Eisenhower jackets that hung just to the waist with a nicely tapered fit. My dad had livestock, and in spite of those long, bulky coats in the modern Western movies, the short, cropped jackets were a tradition among cowboys, just like jerkins worn by medieval knights. Yeah, that's what I mean. Jerkins. The medieval knights wore those things, and so did the Old West kind of cowboys, and so did James Dean and Ike Eisenhower, and so did my dad. At the Lipizzan show at that moment, my dad in his windbreaker looked sharper than any of those horse-loving guys in the audience who wore those goofy-looking ankle-length body bag-shaped dusters. My dad said something important to me during his visit. I talked to him about the arts administrator job, and he asked, "What about your calling?" He used that word calling for the first time. I used to use that word back when I was working on stage. He said it as if he understood. I mean, really deeply understood about a calling. And I know he did understand about that word because he treated his own work on the farm like that's what it was. He farmed as if he was in a priesthood of farming. Now that I think of it, he might have been cynical when he said, "What about your calling?" It might have been cynicism. I don't know. I explained to him that being a performing artist and being an arts administrator was almost the same thing, and he probably saw right through that. The truth is, I just needed a job that paid better than the newspaper. 3 applicants were chosen to be interviewed for the arts position, and I was in the bunch. I'd have an interview with the hiring committee on the morning of September 4, 2001. And in the afternoon, the college president would interview me. Well, I woke up at 8 a.m. that morning. I woke up from a dream The kind of dream that makes you snap out of a deep sleep like, whoa, what was that about? In this dream, I was in a room where some nicely dressed elderly gentlemen were sitting on couches and lounge chairs. I turned and looked right at what looked like a reclining chair, but it wasn't a chair. It was a coffin shaped like a recliner. It had a lid, and the lid was shaped like a dead man, like an Egyptian pharaoh. I looked closer. It was empty. An empty sarcophagus. Well, my morning hiring committee interview went okay. I had snappy, friendly answers for all their questions. One of them asked, "What is art?" And it seems like a stupid question now. I felt good about whatever I said for that question. I shouldn't have felt good about it because now I can see the question is unanswerable. It's a trap because art is an abstract idea and every answer will have flaws. There are moments when you'll know art and experience art, but the verbalization of what art is always falls short. I should have said, "What kind of stupid question is that? I don't like you anymore." Anyway, the interview went as well as I could have hoped, and afterward there was a phone message that I should contact Susan, my wife, now my ex-wife, but call home. Well, the drive home was short, and it'd be nice to grab some lunch between interviews. She was waiting for me as I entered the house, and she spoke my name. I said, "What's up?" And she said, "Your father died." And she put her arms around me. I knew this would happen someday. I knew I'd get this news at some point in my life, so here's how it is. I opened my mouth all choked up, and my voice came out in a whisper. What happened? He'd reclined in his lounge chair for a rest, and he just never woke up. He died at 8 a.m. in his recliner at the same time as my dream. It's as if the dream I had about an empty coffin was to say, "I'm not here. This body isn't where I am anymore." My afternoon interview didn't go as well as the morning session. I should have rescheduled it, but my judgment wasn't very clear at the time. I wanted to get this pointless interview out of the way so I could make the long drive to my parents' house. So I met with the college president. I cried during the interview. The president gave me an interview question. God knows what he asked. I don't remember. It could have been midnight with the lights out in that office for all I knew. I felt like I was in a fog. He asked me an interview question, and I bowed my head, and I cried. Anyway, it turns out I didn't get that job. I don't think I was meant to be an arts administrator. My heart is in the arts part of it, not the administrator part. 7 days after my dad died, the 9/11 terrorist attack happened. The World Trade Towers collapsed. This sounds awful to say this, but it made me feel better. I felt relieved from my grieving to see that there was some tragedy in this world bigger than my own. After we saw the Royal Lipizzan Stallions, when my dad left my house for the last time, he forgot his jacket. It's still in the guest room, hanging in the closet, waiting for him.